we are now live streaming, so good evening everyone, officers and members online, members of the public watching, and to everyone here in the Old Town Hall. Fairly packed agenda tonight, so let's just see how we get on. So without further ado, turning to the clerk, do you have any apologies for absence tonight? Okay. That's all. Any more from the slide? No. Any declarations of interest?
No, Chair.
Yep. No. Yep. And next, we've got the minutes from the last meeting from a few weeks ago on page 13, and we're asked to make any comments and confirm those. Any comments?
Yeah, sorry. If you could clarify whether our comments have been passed on to the cabinet, especially on the finance and capital programme, because the report itself did mention that the comments would be passed on to the cabinet for their next meeting, which I think happened last week.
Okay. Can I turn to officers? That's under section 9, whether I think some of the comments from the minutes have been passed on to cabinet. Can I ask that one to you, Conrad?
Yeah, so I mean, at the cabinet meeting, feedback from the audit committee was collected, and at that point in time, of course, there was not a minute of that meeting, so that can subsequently be shared. I think it's important in that context to stress that although the subject matter is extremely important, the decision at cabinet, certainly in terms of the longer term issues that were raised, was essentially to procure advisors, and there would be at least one more report back that would come via the audit committee. So I think I reflected the audit committee's views as fairly as I could at the meeting. At that point in time.
Okay. So can we vote on the minutes of the meeting? Accurate. Yeah, so that's carried by majority physically present. May I ask the clerk just to take that banner off so we can see people? Okay. Turning to the action log, item 4. We've got a list of actions to be closed on page 19. I think all of these can be closed as proposed. Page 19, action 82 to 106 there. Members agree? Okay, I think members agree for those to be closed. Any comments on the next set of actions? I think we had received an update by email on 2 of those, which is 103 and 104 on IT assets. So I think we can close those. Members agree with 103 and 104 being closed?
Yep. So can you say that again?
103 and 104 on the IT assets.
Thank you.
I think we can close those.
Chair, I just wanted to let you know that I did get 95 earlier today, but I just now haven't had a chance to circulate it.
Okay.
Do that.
Yeah. Any more comments?
If I may, Chair.
Yeah.
103, 104 are in progress.
On that, sorry.
Action point 103. Yeah, and 104. Okay, one is Patrick both Patrick Montgomery. It's open at the moment. It's stated here that they're in progress.
Yes, I think we've just said we'd close those because we've received that by email.
Got them by email.
Got emails today.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Got that one. Okay. No comments? Right, so update on risk management and the risk registers, as part of our ongoing look into the corporate risk register, and we've also see a deep dive into an individual directorate risk in this way, highways. So we can almost split this discussion into 3 parts, and then I'll turn to officers. I think it's what the content of the corporate risk register is, and any particular comment on the highways one, but also where I kind of like us to focus efforts on the approach overall here that the council's adopting. So can I pass over to officers to present?
Thank you, Chair.
Nicola, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just take paper as read. There are really two areas that I'd like to draw the Audit Committee's attention to, which are new for this paper, for this particular meeting. The first, as you said, is the Housing and Highways Risk Registers on pages 37 and 44 respectively. I'm sure the Audit Committee will agree and recognise the investment that's been made in producing these. I think they've really set the standard going forward. And it demonstrates how we're rolling it out across the council and starting to embed that across the council. Relevant directors are here to ask any detailed questions you want to on those. The second area is the risk profile on page 26, which is again a new approach. And this aims to give the committee a holistic, literally one-page overview of the top 19 risks on the corporate risk register, and really to quite literally demonstrate how we are managing those down. So on the left-hand side, we have the residual risk. And then on the right-hand side, we have our appetite, where we would like to be. And over time, you should see for the majority of the risks, the residual risk meeting up with the risk appetite. There will be some situations where that doesn't transpire. And I think we can discuss a few of those tonight. And that you'll be able to see the actual treatment. So we either treat them, we tolerate it, we transfer it by using insurance, or we terminate the activity. But over time, you should see those two merging. And it will provide a one page that I really want the Audit Committee to focus on going forward. And this will be sent to the CMT as well each month. So I have my colleagues from BDO here who are helping support rolling this out. So if you have any questions for either officers or BDO, please feel free to ask.
And just, can I just check which officers we've got here? Do we have officers from housing and highways present?
Yes, Darren Levy here, Director of Housing. Sorry, my camera doesn't appear to be working, but I am here.
Also, Jamie Cook, Director of Highways, Transportation and Parking as well.
Dave Hughes, Corporate Director, Inclusive Economy and Housing.
Okay,
Also,
thanks very much.
sorry, I was going to say Paul Gannon here from Highways as well.
Colin Thomas from Housing as well.
Great, so I think we've got a good cast list if we do want to go into any of the specifics. Who'd like to kick us off?
Like we do, I think.
Mike on screen. All right, yeah, sorry, I'm just having trouble seeing that. Mike, thank you.
Hi, Nicola, I just want to say, and to the team, very well done. As you said, to get this going, get this rolled out is not an easy task in an organisation like Newham, and it's really good to see some thought around actually how it's communicated to both this committee, but actually into the public. The risk profile table is very good. I guess there were some observations from a kind of relatively high level that I had, which is around things like consistency. So I know that there isn't a consistent risk register report and format used. So there's a question of how do officers understand, you know, I mean, we saw that in the controls report, right? One of the big outputs of the controls report was inconsistency in processes and tools across the council. So I think perhaps if someone come back on how we're going to make sure we're consistent in the way that we report on risks across the council, whether that's you, Nicola, or BDO, perhaps, and give us some advice on best practice to achieve that. I think we are going to discuss some of the topics within the risk registers, and perhaps I won't go into those now because I think there's some concerning positions taken on things like IT. But I was just going to ask on the table 2, which you said that you'd like us to focus on in future, it'd be useful as things move, if there's something that can highlight that, and then we can have an extra key or something that says if something's moving up and down, just to pick that up, just so we can understand the position as it is now to where it goes in future. But my key question, I guess, is how do we now make sure that what is a sound risk management strategy, and we all agreed to that in a previous meeting, or the elected officers did, how to make sure that's delivered more consistently across the council?
Thank you. Could I take first go at answering that? So consistency, I thought this question would come up because the two risk registers are slightly different. My focus, this is the first time we've done it, so my focus is content. getting it done, getting it out there, and I think the content for both risk registers is good. Over time, yes, we do want to make them consistent, and we have a tool, JCAD, which is a system where we can load all of this onto, and then we can manipulate it to produce different figures and different heat maps, etc. But my initial concern is just to get the content there, just to get discussions going. And over time, yeah, absolutely, we aim for consistency, but to start with, it's just have the conversations and get everything on paper. And I think they've done a great job, they really do. So the second one on the table on page 2, absolutely, over time, I would like to put in arrows so you can see movements of those. On some of these, I would just urge the audit committee not to expect things to move really, really quickly from one quarter to the next. It might take some time, but we certainly will put arrows in there. And some of these risks, as you've seen before on the corporate risk register, might drop out because it is a living, breathing document, and some may go off the radar for the corporate management team, but go on to local risk registers. So it will change over time.
Thank you. We'll go Winston next and then Fiona.
For me, okay. Page 25, paragraph 2.7, refers to residual risk, and that bullet point 2 refers to move the risk to another party, example on insurance. When would this be done, and for what purpose would you want to do that?
So if I can give you the example of the cybersecurity risk, we do have insurance for cybersecurity. We have insurance which covers both the recovery of data and which cover additional services that we might need to procure to get services back on track. So that's the case where we transfer some of the risk and we insure it away. It won't cover all of the risks. So it won't cover, for example, the impact on our residents if, for example, our systems went down. So insurance is really where you transfer it. I mean, we insure our buildings. So we have fire safety, we have regular maintenance, but we still have insurance on our buildings, as you have insurance on your car, on your buildings. So it's a part and parcel, and you don't have to just use one of those methods, risk management techniques. You transfer some of it, so insure some of it, but you still treat it. It's a combination of how we employ risk management.
Okay. Go to Fiona next. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I think this one is for you, Tim. On page 33, it has number 10, operational, and there was no response received from risk owner, but it's saying that failure to improve our inadequate 2019 Ofsted rating / the risk of SEND provision being rated as inadequate by the CQC at their next inspection. Is there any comment on that, please?
Thank you. I think we have now provided a response, but I'll be corrected if that's not the case. But I know I've certainly responded to some requests on this. The risk clearly is, as is stated, we are due to have a standard inspection, and we've got an item on the Ofsted improvement work. We're due to have a standard inspection probably next year. The SEND area inspection is also imminent, and the outcome of that SEND area inspection could well be a written statement of action, which would mean that there'd be further scrutiny. For both of those areas, we've got significant mitigation, an improvement board that's chaired by an independent advisor appointed by the Department for Education for social care improvement, and very, very significant work that's going on that I'll talk about when the item comes up. And for the SEND area inspection, again, I chair a SEND executive board alongside colleagues from health, schools and parents groups. And we've got a very significant piece of work going on in terms of improvement, self-evaluation, and preparation for inspections.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Nicola, could you just confirm you've received the information that Tim mentioned, please, so this could be updated?
Certainly, I'll pass you over to Ben from BDO because he collates this for the business units. Directorate, sorry.
Hi, good evening. I mean, looking at my records, I haven't received that response. I'm not sure where it's come from, but at present, yeah, we've not received any information regarding that risk on the corporate risk register, I'm afraid. I'm not quite sure it's been directed.
That just be updated or corrected, so it's
I think that's clear.
correctly, please.
We put Tim on the spot there. Whilst we have you, Tim, might I invite you to bring your directorate risk register to a future audit cut? We've got the February one. I don't know what the appropriate time is, but I think members would welcome seeing how you've developed that, and to Mike and Nicola's point around how that builds into the overall corporate risk register. I think we'd invite that. I think members are agreeing here that they'd like to see it at some point.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, hopefully that builds on as well, Fiona, from sort of your suggestion there. John.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to raise the question of stock investment on page 40, which seems rather concerning because on the very likely risk after controls, there's still a likely risk, and it does involve maintaining the new council homes programme, and while maintaining the adaptation of buildings, including meeting the zero carbon requirements, it does seem to suggest that there's a difficulty in maintaining both, which would be a serious matter if both could not go forward, I would suggest. So is my reading of this correct? Is there a risk of not being able to maintain this?
I mean, I'm sure Dave Hughes and or Darren Levy will want to come in on that, but the very, very short answer to your question is yes, and you would expect that on any major programme like this. For example, the significant inflation rate that we're seeing in a lot of the construction sector, as just one, for instance. So in order to manage programmes like this, one always keeps an eye on a number of sort of moving cost factors and builds into programmes that the staff has set out here, the sort of action that could be taken, if all those things move against us. I mean, you're absolutely right. Of course, it is a risk. It's inherent, I would say, in the nature of that sort of activity. I'm sure Dave Hughes or Darren Levy may want to add to that specific, but I think it is important to emphasise the fact that there's a high risk doesn't mean there's anything unusual about Newham.
I think Dave wanted to come in there.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Conrad. Just supplement that, and I know Darren will come in as well, but this is obviously one of our key areas, and we're currently in the process of reviewing the housing revenue account business plan, longer projections. We've got officers here, Colin included, working with Bobby Arthur, who are looking at the HRA. And yes, there will be a balance we have to make about all of our building safety and building upgrade issues, all the changes in legislation, particularly relating to fire safety and Grenfell reports, as well as our aspirations and regulatory requirements for upgrading the sustainability of our buildings. So a lot of moving plates, and we are in the process of reviewing that with the HRA. And as Conrad said, working closely with finance, we're looking at the options for how we can achieve all of those objectives through the different funding routes. But this is the reason why it's rated as it is. There will be a risk there because those costs and those requirements are increasing. And then with an authority with such a large asset base in housing, this is going to be a concern for us, as it's a concern for authorities and large registered providers throughout the country. Darren, do you want to come in on anything?
I think that's covered it, Dave. I think that's covered it.
Thank you. Anthony next, who is on mute, I believe. He's on mute.
Right. Thank you. All right, page 27, the item 1, which talks about the technology. Basically, what it's saying that outdated and old technology is presented an inability to meet service needs and is vulnerable to cyber security risk and a breach of GDPR. My question is, I know the council has got a capital program, and one of my questions, I don't know who's going to answer with this, Conrad or whoever, has any of these old technology or outdated technologies been on the capital program that has not been met? And if so, when is it likely to be met?
Set that one off.
Yep. So there is some of those issues over the last couple of years have been addressed, for example, through the investment in the Fusion system. We've also, and I was just trying to look at cabinet agendas to find the date of the meeting, which I haven't quite done yet, but relatively recently, and I'll check and confirm, cabinet approved a significant investment plan in technology precisely to address some of the sort of inherent cybersecurity risks. So that is now in the capital programme. I will either outside of the meeting or during, if I get time, confirm the date of that cabinet report for you.
Okay, thanks for that. And Chair, can I get another bite at it, another question? And this is to do with the health and safety, and this is on page 3737. And this is to do with health and safety in terms of gas safety appliances and electrical testing. And I noticed this on amber. I also noticed that we're reporting, or officers are reporting to the CMT on a regular basis. But for this committee, how are we in terms of meeting that? Are we on target, or are we significantly below target or on target or whatever?
Shall I come in on that? Just to, it's Darren Levy here, just to confirm, we also have a monthly report to the Cabinet Member of Housing, taken through the key landlord compliance stats, and we're pretty much on target across all of them. I think the only one where we're on catch up is on lightning conductors and testing and program, but apart from that, we're pretty much on target. I think in gas compliance, we're ranging between 99.95 and 99.98% at the moment. We can name the individual properties that are finishing the month without a relevant CP12, and we know exactly which ones we've got injunctions in place where we've got access arranged. So we're at that level of detail now on the gas compliance, and we've done a huge amount of work over the past 12 months to ensure that over COVID. So we've learned a lot during that period. So that monitoring regime is in place and moving forward.
And can you give us the same assurance about the electrical monitoring?
The electrical testing is well on target. It was pretty, I can't remember the last stat. It was 99.98, I think, or even 100% on one or two of them, the block testing. So, you know, we've got very good compliance on those as well. We've also got a third party that carried out a external compliance test on all of our KPI numbers that go into the compliance dashboard as well.
Good. Thank you, Chair, for those assurances. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just go next on more of a general point, looking across the risk register and the various directorate risk registers, which is around the controls, and just a few things, and perhaps BD or Nicola can come in. Is it possible in future iterations to see some of the key control owners? I think we've got clarity over the risk owners, but some of the critical controls, I think, to have a sense of who the owners are for them. And, you know, it's sometimes difficult for us as members to look down the list of controls and to see where's the critical mass, which is the really significant control. And it's particularly those we'd like to see, I think, a named person. So that's thought number one. And then thought number two is around, which I've seen in other non-human risk registers, is around the the controls, the realisability, the timescales, the challenges, the risks around attaining the controls. And you're not going to receive everything in a risk register. So it's just, where does that information, where does that reporting sit, such that a committee like ourselves could see that around challenging the controls, challenging the progress and attainment of them, and the risks around delivering the controls themselves. So yeah, two thoughts on the controls. The first being clear on the biggest ones and the owners of those, and then also around the risks of delivering the controls and where that's captured.
I can take that. Yeah, absolutely. Good points. And as we sort of become better at these risk registers, we can put in more columns and more checks and more balances. And when it gets loaded onto JCAD, which is the tool, it actually has specific sections that you need to complete on that. So yes, it will evolve as we get more used to this, and we can put in more owners. As you quite right say, there are only so many columns that you can put in onto one sheet that makes it readable and makes sense to the audit committee. So please bear with me if I don't put in, 36 columns on one sheet. I'll try and put in as many to make it as meaningful as possible, so you can have a good conversation around it.
And maybe it's us having a sight over in the JCAD and the risk management framework, what other information sits where behind the actual risk register tables. As you say, everything can't be in there, so it's having some of that sight. And then just to add to the monitoring of the feasibility and risks around the controls themselves, how is that captured and reported centrally?
Just to add to what Nicola was saying, so again, once you start to get to the position where JCAD is being fully populated, it can go right down to assurance level. So you're then able to provide assurance against each of the controls, whether those are internal forms of assurance, i.e. you've got your own monitoring mechanisms or your own reporting mechanisms, or whether you've got external assurance. So whether you've got, for example, HSA coming in and doing some work, or additional assurances. So what we're hoping to get to the position of, and as Nicola was alluding to earlier on, it's as it becomes a more living, breathing process of populating on JCAD, actually it becomes a useful management tool then for being able to populate your live risk scenario. So that's the position that we want to get to.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Winston and Mike,
And
if
just
it's
one word of warning for me though, just because the JCAD tool has sections and fields that you can populate doesn't mean to say that we need to do it just to tick the box to get it in there. I'd much rather to get a format of reporting that works for the CMT and that works for the audit committee and that works for NUM, rather than just completing fields for the sake of it. So I think we'll need, as we go along, we need to learn what we want to do and what we don't. I don't want to create an entire industry of huge amounts and volumes of information, pages and pages and reams that no one uses. So I think it will be trial and error, what we need, what works for us as we go forward.
okay. I think that's definitely right. Winston.
Yeah, thanks so much. If I can take you to page 30 and number 5 at the bottom of that page, people. States here, individual co-directors have set targets for reducing agency staff in the departments, and HR reports progress against targets on a monthly basis. Now, I raise this because I think most of us around these tables today experienced that the council was trying to reduce agency staff over many, many years and seemed not to achieve that. The question I want to put is, what targets are given to achieving this goal?
Conrad.
Again, if you give me a few minutes or outside of the meeting, I can provide precise numbers, so I don't have it in front of me. What I do know is that from the data that I would have seen in the last few weeks, the numbers have come down by a very substantial percentage over the last few months, and we're talking 25-30% and more reduction, with significantly more targeted. We did have some further challenging targets to reduce numbers further by the end of March. We brought those forward at the end of December in order to try and further bear down on costs. And I appreciate, there's some sort of history here, and I think legitimate concern on the basis of that. Over the last few months, the numbers have come down significantly. If we continue to hit the targets, we get to at or slightly below London average. That's indicated on the London average as it was a year or two ago when it was set, and of course that average may come down as other boroughs are trying to do the same sort of thing. But really significant progress has been made. There is still quite a lot more to be done, that is fair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And was that a old or final question hand from Mike?
Sorry, just coming off mute. I had a quick question, which was, could we have the drumbeat for the update of these, both at the corporate and at the directorate level, just to understand the frequency at which they are updated, Nicola, just so we can, we understand. And would it be all right if I just ask a couple of questions on each of the risk registers just to kind of give me a bit of assurance and understanding of the council's position on some of the key risks, and also to understand whether the officers are applying the risk framework in the same way? Is that okay, Luke?
Yeah, Nicola, do you want to come on the first point, and then as to your second set of questions, Mike, it might be that some of those are taken offline, but and we come back to you. But yeah, Nicola, on that first point about the cadence.
So that was a question on the timing, how often these are updated?
Sorry, yeah, the cadence, yeah, sorry. I'm speaking Mace language, drumbeat.
So at the moment, we are, as you know, this is the first time we're really building up the risk registers again. So we're going around to all of the directorates and building these up, and then working with the directorates to put those into JCAD if that's the preferred tool for them, so that they can do that on a regular basis. The intention is that these will become regular items at DMT meetings, as health and safety is, as HR is, etc. So those will get updated, and that will, when BDO come to do the risk maturity review at the end of this financial year, that will be something that they look at to see, and how, is it really embedded or is it a one-off exercise?
I think that's clear. And then Mike, you want to counter through your questions?
I was just going to ask around because this is number one risk. So could I just ask the questions? So point 2, controls number 2, all security patches to available software are in place. Is that correct? Whoever, I don't know if the Chief Information Officer is here tonight, but if not, is there someone who can answer for him or her?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes, we have got our patching running. So there was a gap historically, which the audit report picked up, but that was mainly on devices that weren't on our estate anymore.
So I'll just whiz through, Patrick, because I know Luke wants to move on.
Okay.
So are you on target to procure an SOC by 2 weeks' time?
There, because we just need to be clear what, and I would probably turn to the CIO as to what issues in relation to the controls can be discussed in a public forum rather than an exempt forum. So before we just proceed, Mike, can I just turn to Patrick just to clarify what is within the scope, what can be discussed now?
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. And I know it is a problem for you as the audit committee. You do want to check that we are doing our jobs, but the problem with risks, cybersecurity risks, is we don't want to make them too public. So some of my answers may be a bit vague, if just so that we're not letting sort of the bad guys that are out there know where our vulnerabilities.
Okay, fine. Let me ask a question a different way. Yeah. There's some stuff here that has very close deadlines, or even the deadlines are passed.
Yeah.
How does the committee have assurance that those deadlines have been met?
So I think the best way the committee can get assurance is that Nicola's brought in an external auditor to audit us, and that will be redone. That audit has detected some items which we are now responding to, and I think the test for you is to confirm that we have, when that audit gets redone, that we haven't got the same audit points open anymore. Because the problem with security is, cybersecurity is, the risks are constantly evolving. So you sort of, protect yourself against one set of risks and then new ones arrive. So it's always going to be an item that will appear quite high on the risk register. And that doesn't mean that we don't have a whole bunch of controls in place, which we do have. So I just want to assure everyone on this call, we have a lot of controls in place and a lot of measures to protect the council systems and data. But it is a risk. Just the reality of life is it is a big risk. So, and that's why we constantly need to audit ourselves and check and then respond to any actions that those audits come up with.
So could the controls in the risk register be a bit more clear on that regard then? If we're going to be having a regular external or third party assurance audit, that's captured in the risk register as a key control, because that seems a stronger control than perhaps just listing out some of the actions that the division are doing on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's fair, and I see.
I think just generally, if I may, I think it's worth just refreshing this, because a number of these are in place. We've got the report later on. This looks a little bit outdated on the controls. So I think reflecting on that and bringing that back to us next time in light of the report, I think it's almost not worth discussing this, because I know it's from an earlier version, isn't it? That doesn't fully reflect the findings of the BDO report.
Yeah,
I mean, it's only dated September, Chair, so it's not years out of date. I mean, a lot of the reports we receive are longer than a month old because of the procedure the council goes through to sign off before it comes to audit. So
it's just, I think the findings from the BDO report are quite key to changing those and updating those controls. Is there any others you wanted to cover ever so quickly, Mike?
No, I guess personally, I think some of the way that some of the likelies and very likelies are applied in the housing one are a bit dubious, but I think that's not for here. The fact there's a very serious likely incident that low traffic neighbourhoods are going to cause complete loss of service to RMS that will cost between 201 to 500,000 pounds on the budget. That's what serious means. And we're saying item 3, reference 3, because of low traffic neighbourhood zones, that's a serious risk. So I think we've got to be mindful of what serious means, because I wouldn't say that the council will bring in measures to deal with climate change and to reduce traffic in the neighbourhood is causing that much of an issue on some services. So I think we've just got to be mindful of, Nicholas set a very clear framework around what those hierarchy of risk means. We've got to be careful we're not overemphasising or underemphasising risk, because we'll lose confidence in it. And that's the key thing, that we lose confidence in the risk register because it's not being applied consistently.
Yeah, I think that's a general observation that's noted. But I think there's a lot of, I'm going to have to move us on just because agenda, I'm ever so sorry, but if we've got specific questions on the risk register, I think we'd take them offline at this point. I know, because we could go on for quite some time on this. So I would ask that we move on. Do you want to do a sentence each?
Yeah.
Then
First,
ever so quick then.
Well, it's Mike's point I wasn't going to raise, but you've got to balance his point with some points in the highways register, which, are they working together? Question mark.
Similar balancing, similar sort of rebalancing, yeah.
There's references to Brexit effect on recruitment in the labour market. These are circumstances clearly beyond control of Newham alone. But there's also currently things like the fuel, which might be in our vehicles. So I just wondered if there was just a one-liner from Nicola, how other authorities and your experience of how you deal with those more extraneous factors in a risk register. Because I think they are pertinent to any, and we don't want it to be a tick box, whatever it's called.
Yeah, do you want to say a sentence on that, Nick? I think that's really key, where you capture some of those.
So actually there is a fuel risk which is captured in the highways local risk register, because it doesn't apply to all of them. So highways is definitely captured in I think that's on page 63, the last one, the fuel shortage one. And I think that some of the Brexit ones are captured in the local risk registers as well.
Okay, I think it's clear seeing those in direct ones. Sorry to push us on. I know we could go on there, but keen that we keep seeing this over time as we evolve. Okay, item number 6 on the internal audit report. I think again turning to Nicola to briefly introduce this.
Chair, this is Nicole Mativier. I'll be
Thanks,
introducing
Nicole.
the report. So this just summarises the work that's been completed by internal audit since the last meeting. And
Nicole, may I just pause you there, sorry. May
Yeah.
you just speak ever so loud, a little bit louder and perhaps bring the microphone closer to you, thank you.
Yeah. So this report advises members of the audit committee of the work that's been completed since the last meeting and is up to the end of September. So it includes an overview of all the work that's been done, a summary of the implementation of the recommendations, a draft internal audit plan for Q3, and a rolling 9-month plan for other potential audits. It's pleasing to note that we've either got reports to draft or final stages, apart from a couple which started in September and they're being worked on at the moment. And I'd like to bring your attention to the Q3 plan in Appendix D to see if you have any questions. And I'm happy to answer any questions from anybody.
Okay. Winston?
Yeah. Yes, I want to take you to page 69, paragraph .3. The very last sentence in that paragraph saying we will follow up all the recommendations made in these audits when we consider it reasonable to do so. What do you mean by that statement? When reasonable?
So what I mean by that is that in the case of the markets report, they haven't returned to pre-COVID arrangements. So we would need to go back when they are starting to operate in the way that they should. And we're keeping in touch with the relevant service to find out how that is going. In the case of the RMS job tickets, we are aware that a couple of recommendations have been affected by the non-implementation of a couple of IT changes. They're scheduled for the December, so we'll be following that up then and completing the follow-up once the changes have been implemented.
You know off the top of your hand what the original RMS deadline was for that one?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I can find out.
Okay, thank you. Who'd like to go next? John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's on the same page, actually, page 69, 4.3. The internal audit plan, it says, has been impacted by the departure of one of the audit team who obtained another job in the council. Now, just wondered whether there was a good reason for that or whether it was a case perhaps of a lack of joined up thinking across the council. I mean, is there an answer to that?
Based on discussions with the auditor, I think she just wanted a change of scene. She wanted to do something different. It's sort of a related job. It's to do with licensing. So she felt that she wanted to move on and do another job. We have replaced her. The person actually started last Wednesday. And the main gap that's resulted is in the terms of completion of school reports. But there would have been a gap anyway because of the summer holidays. So we're hoping to pick that up in the next few months.
So the impact was minor, in fact?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Conrad.
Just to be clear, individuals are entitled to apply for other jobs in the council. Indeed, we encourage it. There's no lack of.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Mike, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was actually looking at the forward plan, yeah, the draft plan for Q3, and I was going through my notes. Obviously, I've read this paper in order, and obviously later on we've got a further discussion on other matters. But I was trying to align the forward plan with the risk register, and I guess as the officer just mentioned that there are one of the controls for the biggest risk to the council is a rolling assurance and audit function, that maybe those things could be picked up if that's the most appropriate place to pick them up. But it was more of a general comment really, that I just to make sure that what's in the risk register is also reviewed, is also kind of in the audit plan, so that we are using our assurance function and audit function to reduce risk. So perhaps it's not really a question, more of a statement and recommendation that we're looking at the forward plan, that we're reflecting on the risk register as well as perhaps political or other priorities.
Nicole, can I answer that one for you?
Sure.
So on page 24, paragraph 25, that's on the risk paper. You can see how that we're mirroring the risk register up to the audit plan. So we've already done an audit on affordable homes, which was risk 8, just done an audit on cybersecurity, which is risk 2. We're about to do an audit on people performance management, which is risk 4. And we're about to do an audit on budget monitoring, which is risk 15. So we are making sure that we tackle those and that we use risk management as part of our audit planning.
Yeah, thank you. As I'm flipping between pages, I could see some alignment, but it's good to hear that that's been taken on. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you. Just a question more for me, which is on the rolling plan. It is generally more of a question, I think that's directed at Conrad, whether we need to do something around evaluations. And you know, we did have those mistakes this year in terms of the Dockside and others. Is there any merit in your mind to the need for a piece of work in relation to the valuation of the council's assets?
So, I mean, you know, one can always, look for more assurance. I'm not convinced that, if this is, something that the audit and assurance function is best placed to do. I mean, fundamentally, our buildings are valued by professional property valuers. Really little expense, actually, and we've raised the contractual point about some of the errors that were made there. I think the risk almost in having too many people then overseeing that process. I think there are some things that we need to sharpen up in there, perhaps, but I also don't see it as one of the risk areas facing the council. I mean, it's important that the figures are right in the account, but we do need to remember that these are effectively the accounting valuations that are placed on operational properties that we've no intention of disposing of. So I just think we need to be a little careful about assigning even more resources to that area.
For me, it was the property estate that was missing from here in a way across the piece, because I know we've had previous issues with the asset register and so on.
I think, Chair, that's the difference that we saw in this year's external audit. In previous years, there have been issues about whether the asset register is complete, and that is obviously a bit of an issue if you account, say you've got 100 buildings and actually you've got 102 or whatever. Without wishing to gloss over the issue or trivialise it, this year felt an awful lot like two different valuation firms largely debating precisely how to apply the Chartered Surveyor's methodology to value a building. Granted, in one case there was an error on the floor plans that shouldn't have happened, but I do think that that is a relatively lesser risk compared to some of the other things that we focused on.
Okay, that's clear. I just think we've just got to keep challenging this rolling plan based on recent experience from the account gone through. I think that's clear enough. Let's go next. Daniel.
Are we questioning the information on the second half of page 65 now or later? So I just don't want that lost. That's the first page of agenda item 6. Not there yet.
Very which page, sorry?
Not there yet, Daniel.
65.
We're not there yet. We're not yet there. Not there yet. No. Okay. Are we on agenda item? Sorry, which agenda? We're losing us. Are we doing it now? Sorry, we finished the risk register.
Yeah.
Oh, we're long gone.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm losing myself. Well, yes, because the information that I'm raising is something that I just don't want lost if we're coming back to it later.
Yeah. Sorry, are you referring to page 65 and the exempt items? Okay.
Yeah, can you clarify? Because it's been very difficult to hear in this room and people aren't always clear even in the room.
Agenda item 6 refers to items which go into an exempt session later on. What might be worth reflecting on at this stage is looking at the two appendices which are referenced. Why it was the case, what the rationale was for having both of those in exempt. That's for the general rationale point for them being in exempt session at this stage.
Yes.
If I can, well, can I say at this stage that if anyone watching, which is unlikely looking at the Zoom, can see me going on my mobile phone, it's because my laptop which the council laptop isn't working. And so I'm using my phone instead. But basically, I'm trying to understand paragraph 7 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. And the legislation at source isn't terribly informative. I'm also trying to look up relevant parts of the Constitution and struggling. So I'd just like to understand that. Whether we discuss it now or later, I don't mind. I just don't want it lost.
Yeah. Just to bring that together, I think we use this point in the meeting to be very clear as an opportunity for officers to come back to us and explain why both these items have been made exempt, expanding on the rationale that was provided on page 65. Is that okay?
I do that. I mean, just as a proviso to that, if you want to get into any discussion of that, you may need to consider having that discussion in private, because of course, if one gets into the reading too much, it can start to break the confidentiality that needs to apply. But in very broad terms, what I certainly can say in public, there is an appendix that relates to work done on cyber security, and the very, very strong recommendation from officers is that to discuss any of that in public would risk divulging information that could be used by hackers or other people with malicious intent to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the council's system, as any organisation has strengths and weaknesses. And so it would be normal practice for any organisation to have such a discussion in private, hence the recommendation on that one.
May I pause you on that one?
May I
pause you on that one? I don't know if the CIO wanted to build on any of that, if we've still got him. If you wanted to add any more about the rationale and the decisions made around this being an exempt item, to build on what Conrad set out.
Well, I think it's sort of already been said, but basically the problem is if we make public any sort of fragilities that we have with our cyber setup, then the people who are trying to hack into systems will see those as well. So that's a very genuine risk. So
this meeting is being recorded and will be on YouTube.
Yeah, that's clear. So I think that one's clear for now, and we'll come back to sort of suggested next steps afterwards. But then did you want to turn to the rationale around direct payments in general?
So this one, I mean, again, the recommendation is clear, but as with many of these things, there's scope for and debate on it, as I say, some sort of detailed discussion on whether it should be in private or to the extent that itself wasn't in private. But the key point here is that the report contains information that could be used to identify individuals. Clearly, that could be redacted. Coupled with that, you have information about live and active legal proceedings. And once you start redacting and filtering out all of that, what you're left with is a report that actually, if it's a public facing part, that wouldn't ordinarily come to the audit committee, because the remaining matters in there are not trivial, but they're not of the significance that would ordinarily happen to the audit committee. And so by sort of separating things out like that, you're almost left with not really anything to talk about in public. And we think it's much more sensible to have a rounded discussion of the issues raised, which can therefore only be done in private.
Could I just ask a very factual question around the rationale there? You referenced it was an active case ongoing. Is that an ongoing court case, ongoing litigation?
Ongoing legal issues, yes.
Could you just expand on that ever so slightly, just factually, so we can understand in terms of ongoing legal issues? Is there pending litigation? Has litigation concluded? Could you just describe?
Ongoing, so it's not concluded.
Ongoing litigation,
but it's not concluded.
Legal system that has not concluded, as opposed to a legal issue.
Yeah. It's not some right point of law.
Sorry, I wanted to be very clear on that for the record, that it was a matter of ongoing litigation rather than a general legal issues. Okay. Well, firstly, I would like to, before we proceed, I'd like to make one suggestion that the committee takes forward as a motion, which is that in relation to both of these appendix and both of these reports, that a summary is published for public view, recognising it may be very short, it may be more quite general for cyber. It might be more specific for direct payments, taking out individuals and so on. I think looking at across the two reports, a summary cover note could have been published and entered into the public domain. So I'd like to make a suggestion that is tabled for the agenda pack in the next meeting, that officers could perhaps work with myself and the vice chair to see what's possible, whether at least something in relation to both of these papers might be published in the public domain as a summary.
I suggest to take the spirit of that, and then following the discussion of the two reports, it may be possible to, sort of be clearer about what couldn't go in with that. We'll take the spirit of it rather than sort of formally determine that at this point.
Dan, did you have a view on that?
Well, I don't have a strong opposition to that, but what I think is in the public interest for it to be public now is that the only information that members of the committee have on why they are exempt is what is in the public domain. And that's why I was questioning, are we doing this now? Because if you go to those agenda items, there is nothing to help members understand why, apart from the obvious, which is cybersecurity. Obviously, you're going to be careful about what you say, and we all understand that. But what are the rules and what is the law? And if I go to paragraph 2 and paragraph 7 of Schedule 12A, which I do, and people can see my qualifications in the register, I'm none the wiser. And what I want, and I don't mind if it's in the agenda items later on, but I want something more than just quoting a paragraph as a schedule to say what the context is in which we deal with exempt information. And that's what I find so frustrating.
Yeah, so for me, there's two categories of members' concerns here. One is making sure as much of it as possible enters the public domain as is practicable. That was my previous suggestion, and we can have a discussion on the intricacies of what is in and out of that. And the second, I think yours is more of a procedural comment, kind of, which is equally as valid, which is that when this committee, and no doubt others in the council, consider exempt matters, what is the process, what is published in terms of the rationale and the procedure? So I actually wonder if there is a broader action that we'd like to pose around how exempt matters are handled more generally, to give members more clarity over the process, to consider what's published in the agenda pack in terms of reiterating the relevant laws, reiterating the council's guidance, expanding further on the rationale, because I felt this was slightly limited here. So I wonder if we could pose a general action to generally review the process for exempt papers, covering some of those points, to have maximum clarity in future around why it is, how it came to be, certain matters were exempt.
We can certainly revisit the training that's being provided on that. No problem at all.
Sorry, I just missed that. I'm sorry.
We can certainly re-provide the training information that's been given on that previously and bring it up to date, and then the members of the committee will have changed and see if there's anything to be added to that. The other thing I would say, in fairness, that is, a perfect standard way of producing in local government. I entirely get the point that's being raised. There's no problem whatsoever with any member of the committee simply contacting the relevant officers, myself or Nicola, for example, in advance of the meeting, and saying, I'm not really quite clear why this has been exempt. Would you mind explaining it to me, please? And we can,
yeah, I think that's it.
One of the reasons why we publish papers a week in advance, so that if people have got queries on facts or things they're uncertain about, they can contact the relevant officers in advance to clarify that. So that offer is always open.
I think to formalise that, that's absolutely key. Members having that understanding, more detail on the rationale, which was missing in terms of when we received the papers. I think what would be helpful for me personally, I don't know what the members, is having more advanced sight of exempt papers over not just 1 week, but slightly longer, so that we can have that engagement. I think that's key. And then, but secondly, to my earlier point around suggested action, I do think we need to review the process and think about what more can we say in tables such as this on page 65? What more can we publish in the agenda that explains the rationale? I would hope that isn't too much of a burden on the process, but I think the process can be enhanced so that in the published materials and prior to publication, there's more clarity about the rationale. So that's the broad action I'd like to suggest. Neil.
Yeah, I concur with that. It's not about going into the detail, it's about the justification for why. And I'm glad we're still in public session, because I think, you know, we are a check and balance that's very important for the organisation, reputationally and all the rest. So I think, you know, this balancing act is always a bit delicate. We can see on some things why, but I think just one section, and as Daniel, who is a lawyer, says, you know, section 12A, and I've been on the council some years, it's slightly, you know, opaque guidance that we be given. But for the point of the public, I think we do need a justification more than just that, you know, it outweighs the public interest, whatever, compared with, you know, the council's interest. I think we just have to sort of be a bit more careful on that process line. Yes, doesn't have to go into compromising the detail of why it's exempt, but why the decision's been made.
For me, it was, as Conrad articulated in his opening remarks, I think it would be a benefit to the public if that were published in the agenda pack.
Yeah.
That's my point about the process that I think should be actioned on to, in future, publish more about the rationale in the pack, where possible, give members more time to engage with officers on those questions.
Is that a paragraph at most?
Could I potentially action those two things if members are in agreement around publishing the rationale and in
but just a word of warning, and I think Conrad would welcome this suggestion that, you know, Conrad is not you know, head of legal and governance. So, you know, I think we have to have
taking the words out from
that. I don't think we should put Conrad on the.
As an applicant, general action, if I may pose it, to work with members of the committee to improve,
to go through Daniel and or whoever's the relevant,
particularly around clarity of the rationale in published materials.
Yeah.
Later on, we'll go into the exempt session and go into the detailed points. But can I just loop back to where I originally came out, which was the summary of the two papers put into the public domain for the next meeting. The members content with that as an action.
Yeah, just to clarify, when you say summary, do you mean the summary of what it's exempt or summary of the issues?
I mean, where possible, to have a summary of the issues that balance the need for caution around risk with the need for transparency, because at the moment the papers are in their entirety exempt. Sorry, just 1 second.
That discussion of having private items for the principle is entirely understood. I think I really think you ought not to resolve that matter until you have a chance to discuss the issues in private.
Well, I think looking in the papers, I think there is at minimum a paragraph that could be published for each. You know, we can get into the ins and outs of what's in that published document. I think at minimum that document exists in some guise. So I think we can resolve it at this stage while we're in the public session, so the public know who are watching it, that we are going to do our very best endeavours as a committee to work with officers to ensure that some of this is summarised and entered into the public domain. So I feel we can resolve that now. And we can, as you say, Conrad, get into the nuances of what is in and out. Yeah.
No, I think that's helpful. I think some of what's in that report is in the public interest, and I'm mainly referring to the second part of what's referred to on page 65. You know, I take the points about cybersecurity, not sharing the information, but I think on the issue of the second point, I do think it would be a matter of public interest to provide at least a summary or redacted version to the general public. That's my personal view.
Can I see agreement from members physically present in relation to that recommended action?
Forgive me. Yeah, I think it's the exact wording that we want to determine, because we don't want a conflict in terms of bringing it back to the next meeting. You see, because I am thinking But we have to be mindful of the damage that we probably do to the individuals who probably are mentioned in that report. And would the investigation be concluded before the next meeting, or would it be ongoing? So that's my concerns at the moment. So I think we have to shape the recommendations so that it would not be in conflict with anything that is in.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's the whole point of the recommendation, that any sensitive material isn't included in the publicly available summary. But yeah, sorry, Narisa.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Luke just said, and I agree with what you're saying, Winston. I think the point of the summary in the redacted version is to ensure we exclude the information that might, harm the council or any individuals. But I do think we have to recognise that it's in the public interest for some of that content to be shared in the correct way.
Before I turn to Mike, can I just for seek agreement on my sort of two recommendations. One is that we work with officers to review the process around it, namely publishing the rationale and timelines. Is there an agreement on that? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the second one was around publishing a summary without the sensitive material that's redacted and entering that into the public domain by way of putting it to the next agenda, with the particular detail to be agreed. And that's agreed by all of the members here. So those two actions have been agreed. The public summary be agreed to be pragmatic and work with officers and balance the risk of public transparency, and also looking at the process, publishing more about the rationale up front, and also the time frame members get materials. So a procedural point and a substantive point on publishing summary. So we've got those actions there. Mike.
I've lowered my hand. I was gonna bite on something someone said, but I'm not going to. I'll keep my view to myself.
Okay, so I think we've got those suggestions there, and later on we're moving to exempt discussion on those items. We can move on the need for transparency with. Any more questions on item 6 and the internal audit report or the rolling audit plan? No. Item 7, and this I believe is to be presented by Emma and Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, how would you like to take this item? I can say a few words or a number of words in introduction, or happy to take questions, whatever you would prefer.
Looking to get into questions, could you just start with the most recent update compared to when we got the paper? Was there a September visit? I don't know if that was, we saw the letter. Yeah. So could you just cover the most recent update?
Yeah, of course, Chair. Yeah, so most recent update, we had a monitoring visit, which was our 4th in September. And that was two inspectors for 2 days, looking at services for children in care and care leavers. And the letter that follows that monitoring visit is due to be published on Tuesday next week. But what I can tell you overall is there were some very positive points from that letter, and I think the headline was services for children in care and care leavers have improved. There were some positive comments following conversations with social workers and personal advisors who spoke confidently about their work. They found that the audits had improved, were more accurate, and certainly identified the key relevant issues. They found that the workers they spoke to described their caseloads as manageable. They recognised that recruitment and retention remains a challenge, but could see plans that were in place and progress that was being made to address that challenge. They felt there were clearer expectations of practice, and staff feedback was that managers and leaders are visible and approachable, and they feel more secure and confident. There is more work to do, however, and whilst they saw some real improvements, there are still areas for us to work on overall, but in particular ahead of the standard inspection. So the areas that we still need to focus on is the consistency in quality of supervision, of case recording and of care planning, and the use of panels to ensure that permanency plans, for example, are well progressed. Some of the tracking systems need to be strengthened. Some of the direct work with children, which is described as life story work, again needs to be more consistently in evidence across all case files. So there was a general comment that the recording on case files doesn't necessarily reflect the quality of the work that's going on. There's more work to do to ensure that we are systematically recognising and marking the achievements of individual care leavers. And we need to make sure that care leavers are well informed of their financial entitlements. And that's a piece of work we've been doing through a local offer that's about to be published. And there's a range, Chair, I won't go into it in detail, but there's a range of further work that's going to be progressed at this next phase of improvement. We're going to continue to focus on improving the quality of supervision, the quality of planning, and the quality of case recording. And there's a whole range of steps in place to review progress on a fortnightly basis. So, Chair, unless you want me to expand on anything, I'll leave it there and take questions.
Thank you. I'm just going to put one action on there, which is to share the letter from Ofsted with us. Thank you. Neil.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tim, and thanks for the report. Because we're really concerned here about process rather than the nitty-gritty. On page 80 of our bundle, paragraphs 9.1 and 9.3. Now, this authority is not unique in having a DFE-led improvement board. So I just was curious why under 9.1 that the performance KPIs have been around this sort of agenda since Ofsted. So why is that to be completed in November? Why hasn't it been completed already? Was my sort of initial prompt. And then a sample of 6 indicators, which was very helpful, was available in paragraph 4. But if I look at cross-referencing with this performance indicators thing, which is Appendix 3, it says to approve these KPIs and it's going to every improvement board for discussion. Quite rightly, but why is it that, is it the process of the KPIs themselves that's going to be completed, or are they referencing to the improvement boards? You see what I mean? I think there's a slight ambiguity there. So KPIs, you're not starting from a blank piece of paper because other authorities have been in this. Is it about the process of completion of the coverage of that KPI discussion? Does that make sense? I thought it was open to 2 interpretations. So, can I come back with another 2? It's just, yeah, do them all at once because I think we might lose it otherwise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No, you're absolutely right. We have hundreds of KPIs, in fact, for children's social care. So having the KPIs in place is not the issue. The issue is identifying which KPIs the improvement board should really be focusing on. And actually, it's not just about presenting data, it's about the analysis and the meaning of that data. And I think we also have Ali Omar here, who's the Assistant Director of Improvement. It's about how we visualize that data. So I think it's fair to say, whilst we've been rich in data, we've been very poor in analysis and visualization. So it's about streamlining the number of performance indicators. It's about selecting the ones that we think are most meaningful, and it's about presenting them in a way that both gives the improvement board the right level of analysis and also a clear visual presentation of them. And this is a product of the work that we've been doing with Leeds City Council, who are our improvement partners. and we've very much drawn on the approach to data that Leeds have used in their very successful improvement journey.
The next two, very briefly, I don't want to dominate this. Under 11.3, fourth bullet point down, continue to manage the delivery of the Cove. Now, I hope I'm in the right geographical location. This is a building that was part of the asset register because it's owned by the council, opposite the town hall, rather embarrassingly, if I'm on the right track. And it says for completion in 2022. Why has it taken so long? And I'm asking as a corporate parent as much as anything else. This is leaving care. And then I think we've already answered the completion of the performance indicator project, you know, was also there. So it's just about the ambiguity. And then finally, just me all the time. On page 84, deliver the ongoing transformation work being undertaken in the fostering service. There's no mention in the previous document whether we should have brought previous agendas. Can we just be reminded on what the transformation work, because it highlighted till that last the penultimate bullet point. So why has the hub taken so long to open? And secondly, are we on track about this fostering service? Because both are quite crucial in the performance indicators that you've referred to. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, I think we've all would have wanted the Cove to be ready sooner than it's going to be, and that's for a whole host of reasons. There's been quite a significant amount of refurbishment work that's been required, which has required a significant contract, which has gone through the usual procurement route. So there's prior to the procurement process, there's been a very significant co-production process to ensure that we're designing the Cove in a way that young people themselves want it to be delivered in. We then went through a procurement process, and we've had many conversations with colleagues from across the council to look at whether or not we could streamline those processes more. But we've also clearly been managing and planning this through the pandemic, which has also led to delays, both direct in terms of officer time and indirect because of the challenges around getting construction underway. So I share your concerns, Councillor. We would prefer to have been able to deliver this sooner, but there's a whole range of factors why it's perhaps taken longer than we would like it to. But I'm really pleased that the end product, I think, is going to be very good, and it's one that is co-produced with young people, but also we're starting to deliver the sorts of support that we're going to deliver from the Cove from other venues in the interim. And we can talk more about the services that have been developed for care leavers if that's helpful. The transformation of the fostering service, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to ask Emma to come in with some key headlines around what that transformation looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So it's really focusing on the recruitment of foster carers and bolstering the provision of in-house placements, looking at the support for our foster carers. So thinking about how we can enable more children to remain in foster placements and to stay in foster placements through to their transition to becoming adults, and supporting them therein, but also some children who perhaps might escalate in terms of their need and require a higher level of provision, and typically might move into residential placements, which can be really costly out of the local area, and not necessarily tailored in the right way for those particular children. So we are looking at how we can provide more wraparound support for our children in the context of helping them to stay and remain in foster placements. It's also looking at how we effectively kind of track and monitor children's progress whilst they're in our care, and really about raising the quality of the provision, both in-house and also with external those as well, more effective.
Sorry, you jumbled a little bit there, but we got the gist of it, I think. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think my internet's a bit unstable. Apologies.
I'll go to Harvinder first, and Narisa.
Thank you, Emma, for that. Just a couple of questions, really. The first is page 80, talking about recruitment. And obviously, I welcome the report saying that obviously there's been an increase by additional 15% from 50% to 65. That's a welcome thing, and obviously, I hope we're going to carry on making progress on that. But my main questions are around the video that's been produced. Obviously, it's in late September. Do you think that that's going to make a substantial difference? And also, when we talk about the children and care, do you think that they're adequately covered when we think about the crime statistics, and also the fact that the children within our care or foster care are being adapted to the fact that crime is not the answer? And do we have any statistics? Sorry, can't say the word. The figures about what is the proportion of the children within our care that do actually tend to go towards that kind of I'm trying to think of a word, towards crime. Let's put it this way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll start the response, and Emma might want to jump in on that last point. In terms of the recruitment and the video, well, you know, there is no miracle cure for the recruitment and retention. We think the video is a strong and helpful tool. We've already got, I think, over 500 views of the video. We've got an open evening tomorrow evening, and we've got over 80 people signed up to it. So this recruitment and retention piece is it's going to be a long, slow sort of a piece of work. We are starting to turn and build momentum, and actually what we've seen is people have much more interest in learning more about what we're doing in Newham, much more interest in applying for jobs in Newham, and that recent sort of set of appointments has been really heartening in terms of our ability to attract really talented people into Newham. So it's not over yet. By no means are we complacent, and you know, the video will help, but it won't be, you know, the whole answer. But I think we are making good progress. On the second point, in terms of children in care and the work we're doing with them around making sure they're making positive choices, I think, you know, one of the things we're really focusing in on, I could talk for a long time and I know we don't have it, but one of the things we're really focusing in on is for those who are care leavers for 18 years and over, a real focus on supporting them to be in education, employment and training, because it's when young people often don't feel they've got a clear purposeful activity in their lives, when they're more likely to be attracted to making choices that aren't the right ones for them. So we've got 2 additional members of the team, and it's their job to particularly engage and focus on those young people who are currently not in education, employment and training, and really support them into those first steps along a pathway to a more positive set of outcomes. And I think of all the performance indicators, it's those children in employment, education and training at the end of the care system which really says a lot about our ability to have a positive impact on those young people. Emma, I don't know if you want to say anything more about those young people who are in care and may have had some involvement in offending behaviour.
Thanks, thanks, Tim. So there is a real focus on seeking to prevent the criminalisation of children in care, and there's a sort of guidance that's been issued for local authorities to support in that. Just looking at figures of the 135 children that are open to our youth offending service, 23 of those are looked after children. And a smaller number are looked after by virtue of their current status in terms of being in custody. So I think it is a small number of children who are looked after who will commit offences, and the larger proportion of the 413 children who are looked after actually achieve some fantastic outcomes, and we should be really proud of their achievements. I think we've got approximately 55 young people who are currently at university who we are supporting. So I think whilst we must absolutely focus on those young people who kind of struggle and perhaps kind of their behaviour poses potential challenges, actually the vast majority of children who looked after do very, very well, and we need to be kind of supporting all of our children to make progress and to kind of be aspirational for them, which we are. And those children who are looked after and open to the youth offending service are subject to kind of targeted plans and support and intervention to help divert them away from kind of those pathways. And certainly kind of we've introduced some new schemes working with probation, looking at children at those transition points into adulthood to see how we can more effectively support them and get them kind of started with the right support around them, housing, all the other kind of features, financial support, to see that they can make progress as they grow and move forward.
Okay, thank you. Narissa.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I think the recruitment video is really, really good, and I think maybe other service areas can learn from that in terms of recruitment practices. So just wanted to say thank you for that. I just wanted to ask, in terms of last meeting, I think I asked how many children were at risk, and Tim, you mentioned that there was 379 children who are currently at risk, and I just wanted to know, since you've had the monitoring visit, has there been a reduction in that? And if there hasn't, do you expect there to be a reduction during the full inspection next year?
Thank you. I think in terms of defining who those children and young people are who are at risk, the simplest measure we have are those who are subject to a child protection plan, but that wouldn't count all children and young people at risk. Just going by that simple metric, we have seen a decline, a reduction in the number of children who are subject to a child protection plan, but we would expect that number to fluctuate, and it's one of those sort of Goldilocks indicators. You don't want it to be too high and you don't want it to be too low, and when you have identified a child who is at risk, what you want in place is a robust and effective plan to mitigate against that risk, and an ability to react and respond if that risk gets to a level that's not tolerable in the community. And we work very hard to try and avoid that happening. But when it does happen, we then escalate to a what's called a public law outline process, where we consider if the case needs to go into care proceedings, and potentially we then progress to care proceedings where we're asking the court to make a decision about the long-term plan for that child. But I hope that's a helpful answer.
Okay, thank you. And can I just bundle up the questions and then come to yourself? I'll start with John here. We'll jot down the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is related to 6.7 on page 79, where we're told that the aim is for the vast majority of case records to meet the quality, the above mentioned quality standards by April 2022. That may well be a satisfactory target date, but I did wonder why it would take as long as that to be done. And it does depend on supervision and monitoring. So I was wondering, is the monitoring and supervision process fully operational at this time?
Okay, thank you. Hopefully jotting these down, Tim, but we'll go to Fiona and then Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Tim, I'd just like to say that it was good to read all the progress. I'm sorry that the pandemic impacted the, not to off sideways. There are still some things to work at, but I'm hearing some very positive stuff from yourself and Emma, so that is making me feel quite comfortable. Just in the Ofsted letter, they said that some staff mentioned about clunky IT. Has that been referenced? Have you looked at that? Is that something that you're aware of or you see that as an issue? Because I think it was not just in terms of IT kit, but the actual system, childcare system that you're using. So, and then Appendix 5, I just wanted to understand, how are you going to feed the feedback from the young people? How is that going to be incorporated into your work? How are the social workers, managers going to focus on what these young people have said? Because some of these comments are quite sad. This is them being honest about their situation and needing to be heard and listened to. So how are you going to take this and actually make this into something real so the children, the young people, feel heard and see the difference in how they're treated and in their care plans and everything like that? So Appendix 5 is key. And I'm glad that, Ali, we had the quick catch up about to incorporate stuff in the report. I'm really pleased to see that. But, this is a live thing. This is not repairs in someone's house. These are real people. Emma talked about, the people having good outcomes. How does this get impacted as well?
Really great questions. Thanks, Fiona. And then Mike.
I've got an easy one to finish on. It's for Tim, actually. So confidence in passing the next Ofsted inspection. Where are we sitting at the moment?
Great.
Okay. Let me make a start, and I think Emma might come in there as well. Yeah, in terms of getting the vast majority of work to the standard, where we expect it to be by April next year, you're absolutely right, Councillor. Supervision and oversight and quality assurance is critical. So we've done an awful lot of work to strengthen and improve the quality assurance or the auditing work that's carried out by the team. We've seen in this latest monitoring visit a recognition that process has indeed strengthened. It is addressing and identifying the pertinent issues. We need to make sure that the plans that come out of those audits absolutely are realistic plans to address the issues that the audits discover. So we're nearly there. We just need to do a final tweak to make sure it is right. And what we're doing is we've got a monthly cycle of audits. Each service area is committing to a monthly cycle of what we call dip sampling, so a slightly less extensive look at the work. And the three key areas that we're really focusing in on, not exclusively, but the real focus for me is the quality of supervision, the quality of case recording, and the quality of planning. And every fortnight, I sit down with Emma's team, and we go through a service at a time and look at where are they, what is their performance like, what is the progress, where are the risks, and what is their trajectory. And that's a more robust process for me to ensure that we are on track. And let's be honest, the improvement journey will whatever the outcome of the next Ofsted inspection, I'll cover that in a minute, the improvement journey will continue beyond that, because I'm absolutely sure there is more improvement we can do beyond the next Ofsted inspection. But the reason it takes so long is because so much of the system was not working properly, and there were so many people had left the organisation, and therefore where you have a position where there's a lot of temporary staff, there's a lot of people moving around, it's very hard to get that tight management grip, and it's very difficult to be absolutely crystal clear about the expectations that we have of each social worker and the standards of practice we want to see. But I'm really pleased to say we are absolutely moving in the right direction, and we have picked up momentum on that process. The comment about the clunky IT in the system, some of it was about the actual kit and making sure we got them the right kit at the right time during the pandemic, and we recognise that and we've responded to it. But we also know that, you know, there are a few case recording systems out there on the market. Newham chose to go with a system that is only used by a very few local authorities, and that was some years ago. We have contract with that provider. There are concerns that social workers have raised, and we are doing our level best to respond to those concerns. And Emma and her team have done an awful lot of work to streamline that process and to improve the system and the way it's used. But we recognise at some point in the future there might be a time when we review the right system to use moving forwards, whether it's the one we have or whether we would seek to, well, we'll need to look at a re-procurement exercise at some point anyway. And then I'll go on to the confidence question, and then I'll pass to Emma, who's going to say a bit more about young people's feedback and how it's incorporated. But in terms of confidence, I am absolutely 100% confident we have made significant progress since the 2019 inspection, and I am confident that when we are re-inspected, they will recognise the progress we have made. So Emma, do you want to come in on the question about Appendix 5 and young people's voices?
Yeah, that's absolutely, and the exercise that is represented in Appendix 5 is an example of where we are actively seeking children and young people's feedback and perspective on services, so that we can incorporate that into our plans for change. Whilst, you know, we have a focus, an important focus on the quality of supervision, planning and recording, we are absolutely focused with those purposes in mind, in terms of the delivery of the service to children and young people and improving that. And as Tim has mentioned, a key aspect of that is improving stability within the workforce, so that children and young people are able to establish meaningful and lasting relationships with key people who are supporting them, that, for various reasons that have been outlined previously, has been a challenge within Newham, and I think we are absolutely moving in the right direction in terms of being able to improve the permanent contingent of our workforce, both at management and kind of first line practitioner levels. And the other aspect is taking on board the feedback is really providing children and young people with the skilled workforce. So a workforce that is trained, is able to be in a position where they can hear the voices of young people and children, and be able to translate that into kind of meaningful action that will help create change for those children and young people. So, and that's at kind of individual casework level, but also at kind of team and service level. We've made some significant changes to our corporate parenting board. We've had children and young people's input in terms of our corporate parenting strategy, and also into the revisions that we've made of our local offer to care leavers. So children and young people's voices and their feedback is absolutely at the heart of creating kind of the case for change, really, for children's social work in Newham.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to.
Sorry, can I just quickly say, just to follow on to that, it said one of the feedback, it takes ages to find a worker who really cares and really helps us. Adults ruined it for us. Adults are the ones who need to fix it. We just want workers to do their job and treat us like we matter. So the children, the young people are feeling this. So what you're saying has to follow through,
Well made, thank you. And Mike, was it a quick one?
I'm really sorry, my question wasn't answered. My question was confidence in passing the next inspection, not confidence in your work.
And how would you define passing the next inspection?
Okay, so going up a grade in the inspection rating.
Yeah, I'm very confident we'll go up a grade.
Okay, I think that's precisely clear. Thank you. No, it's getting clearer to me. I can see the progress and I'm understanding the reports more. So thank you ever so much. And we'll look forward to seeing Ofsted letter as well. Thank you. So let's move on to next agenda item 8 on complaints improvement plan. Quite a few areas here was quite far reaching. Could officers just speak for just a few sentences, because I think we've got quite a number of questions here. We have questions. Who was I handing over to just for a couple of sentences on the complaints improvement plan? Peter Colford.
Should be Ron Springer, shouldn't it? Or Jessica Cook.
I'm sorry, I thought Ron Springer was coming to this meeting, but I can't see him.
Can't see him on the call.
Assume he was online. I can attempt very quickly to see if I can.
Well, we'll move on to the next agenda item and then flip back. Okay, let's do it that way. Let's see if you can get hold of anyone. If not, I'll just make a general comment. We'll need to come back to it, obviously. So let's flip on. The quality assurance plan report from Nicola. I think I'm handing over to you, or Nicole. Thank you. I think it could be a quick one.
Sorry, you had counter forward next.
Sorry. Yeah, Chair, we're going to do agenda item 9, which is counter forward.
Skip 2 over. Apologies for that.
And that will be to Nick Sharp.
This will be item 9 over to Nick on counter fraud. I can see Nick's popped up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Cautious of time and also taking the report as read, I really just wanted to kind of focus on a couple of points, which was from there that I'm really pleased that now we've been able to kind of strengthen the team and get in some really good investigators to help continue to get the results we've been getting, get more, and really now, because of that, we've been able to start looking at a lot more of our proactive plans. So hopefully in the second half of the year now, we're going to be able to really deliver on looking at more proactive stuff rather than just the reactive stuff. And equally, obviously due to restrictions now being lifted, I'm also very hopeful that by the time we next meet, we would also be able to share some successful criminal prosecutions. They just didn't quite make it in time to be able to share them at this committee, but hopefully by the next one, I'm quite confident we will be. So taking the report as read, I'm happy to take any questions anyone might have.
Yeah, I think we saw it in July. not long since we've seen you, but yes, Neil, thank you.
Yeah, I think we just have to have it on public record as we're being recorded and on live, that, you know, the team may have been able to now resume tenancy visits and interviews, but there still is a backlog with the court system. So I would hope, I don't know how far we can do this, but the MOJ is annoying us in other areas, you know, that come in our purview in this as elected members. This backlog, you know, have we, whether it's at healthier level or, you know, as politicians, is there things we can do to try and put either political or at least sort of operational pressures on the MOJ? The court's backlog is getting serious, I think.
Might be a bigger question on a more corporate level. I don't know if you wanted to ask.
I suspect our influence is, I'm sorry to say, but probably fairly limited. I mean, they're well aware of the significant issues that the backlog in the court process causes, you know, in this and in many other spheres of public and private life. I'm, you know, perfectly happy to write a letter to them, you know, emphasising the point. I mean, it.
That's what I flag it.
Sorry, just to make a difference. So they're aware of it.
You know, and I just think it's something that the audit committee needs to be sort of cognizant of, and
we need to keep on that, thinking about it at the time. Yeah.
You know, just some of the short term, you know, we have tried, and in fairness, the courts have tried, you know, for them it's been coming after the 19th century. I sometimes think, you know, to be a lot more creative during the current period. So, for example, virtual court hearings, which would have been, you know, completely unthinkable. You know,
they're doing weekends, I think.
Yeah, you know, so a lot has been done to try and mitigate things to the extent that we reasonably can, but you know, we are just fundamentally constrained by the availability of courts, and in some cases just can't eventually be moved forward until time is resolved, and you know, that's a big issue for society, not just us.
Okay, Mike.
Hi, Nick. Going forward, is your focus still on corporate fraud, housing fraud, and COVID business grants, or are there any other areas that you've got a forward plan of looking at counter fraud activities in?
Yeah, I mean, there are some other areas in which we're currently exploring how best to approach the proactive work, and equally, I attend sort of the management meetings and forums within the council and kind of encourage other areas to kind of come to us if they want to discuss any specific needs, really. So we're reaching out to more. Whether or not at this moment in time I can comment, because we're still sort of negotiating the terms of how which kind of areas we're going to do, but certainly by the time we next meet, there will probably be some that are on the report that we're in the middle of.
Okay. Yeah, just quick one from Narissa. Finishes up.
Thank you. I just want to say on 2.3, you say during the second half of 21-22. Do you mean sort of a reduction on the housing investigations? Because it says in the report there's over 150 investigations. I know 15 of those are in the civil courts, but do you see a reduction of that? What do you mean by anything?
So I was just struggling to hear the last part of that. I heard about the 150. What is it? The reduction part? What was that? Sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
No, I was just saying, because you've put in 2.3, we expect an increase in results in the second half, 21-22.
Yeah.
You said that the team is working on over 150 investigations. I'm trying to understand, what do you mean by an increase in results?
Okay.
Of that case or successful prosecution? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, as a whole, everything. I mean, the reason I say that is because often when new investigators start, it takes some time for them to get their own cases, to plan them, to interview. So we kind of call it cycles within our own team, but it is very likely the fact that we've had 3 new investigators that have all sort of suddenly come in and have all got kind of, you know, 30 to 40 cases each. It's only natural that usually it's the 3 to 6 month, 3 to 9 month period of time from when they start those cases that the results come in. So it's more about experience in knowing how long it takes the cases that they've got since coming in will take to come to fruition. That's kind of what that comment's based on.
Okay, thanks ever so much. I think we can leave it there, and we're seeing you regularly, aren't we? So
yeah,
much, Nick.
Thank you.
I I'll move us on to 10, then we'll sweep back, see if any officers are available. So on the Quality Assurance Improvement Plan report, it's quite a self-explanatory review that's been undertaken and the findings against the requirements, but anything we should be aware of as a headline, Nicole?
I'd say that this is the start of the process. So we've put in place a series of team meetings, one every month, to review the action plan and to demonstrate us moving up the compliance ladder. So as I said in the report, we're going to be reporting regularly back to the Audit Committee on our progress. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a useful start. We'll monitor progress. Any comments, questions? Don?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on page 163, 2.4 D. A succession plan exists to ensure that senior vacancies are filled promptly by appropriately qualified staff. I just wondered what figure you could put on promptly, what time scale?
I'd say that this standard is very aspirational, and it's mostly targeted at much larger audit teams. So in terms of being able to demonstrate our compliance with that, because of the size of our team, it's going to be quite difficult. But we can look at developing staff at a lower level, encouraging them to increase their qualifications, etc.
Okay.
I think the only comment from me is just around the non-compliant requirements and having set timescales next to each one of them. But I can leave that perhaps with you to come back for next time.
Yeah, of course.
Just really on the non-compliant areas, and then as we go over the years, we can push up on the maturity, but to have that time scale so that, as you say, we can track progress at this committee.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? No. Back to item 9 on complaints. Did we manage to get hold of anyone?
The two officers I was seeking offline, one on holiday. I think maybe there's been confusion. Then you apologise.
Okay. Well, look, let's flip to item 9 and just say, that is disappointing. The officers can't there. I think we try and manage our agenda times closely. Can I just highlight one thing which is worth flagging which is the most uncomfortable part of this, and we talked about it actually before members met today. And looking at the letter from the Ombudsman, just find it. Just wanted to highlight this. It's an area where this committee would be most disappointed, really. Page 136. It's effectively where the chair of the Commission for the Local Administration and the Ombudsman references. On one occasion, we had to resort to threatening to issue a witness summons in order to elicit the information required. That's disappointing to hear that we get into that level as a council in terms of engagement with the Ombudsman. There's lots in the report around members' complaints, complaints against adults and the case times about settling work with the Ombudsman, but to see that it had got to that level, that the Ombudsman was then threatening to issue a witness summons, I just think all of us on the committee would be disappointed that it had got to that scale. And we'd like to know more about that, and we'd like to get into this. So it's a shame officers can't be here, really.
Are we going to proceed with this then if we have nobody to report? Are we going to defer this? I
think it has to be deferred to the next.
And can we make certain that on the next we don't have just a report with a pink sheet which has just gone to cabinet and it's specifically tailored to this committee? It doesn't even tell us on the cover sheet what the decision is. Are we to note it? I note that the clerk has put that we note it, but there's ways of handling our committee rather than just doing something. Because if you turn over to 113, it's a cabinet.
That's clear, yeah. I think I've noticed it as well. So reflecting on making it a bespoke audit, and we're getting on in a second to our agenda actually, and the work that's been done on that, on our terms of reference, sorry. So yeah, custom bespoke piece to our. Let's move on from that, and as I say, we'll have to come back. Yes, sorry.
We need to extend Stan.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, 3 minutes, got a little bit to go through. So I don't have the wording, but can we, in accordance with the
I just pass just get nomination and seconder to resolve to pass a standing order for up to 30 minutes.
I'll second, but it's only to dispose of the items within a due process. We're not saying a time till 9:30 or something, just so that we could make progress to dispose of the rest of the items. Is that all right, Nicholas? Yeah, we're doing that up to a maximum of half hour, it's normally, isn't it? Yeah. Do that. Yeah. Is that resolved by? Sorry, we have to, it's the elected members after this.
Yeah, so we're going to have 9, we'll do the best we can. And that takes us, let's jump back to agenda item 11. And it's the Audit Committee Effectiveness Report. But I engage, can I just encourage members, if you didn't participate in the self-evaluation, can you feed back any comments to Nicola? Because that'd be really helpful, having read this report. I know it was the summer and so on, but can I just strongly encourage those that weren't able to circle back round? Nicola, is there anything you wanted to draw out, and then I can reflect on one area which was the terms of reference? But yes, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. This paper really collates responses from this audit committee's self-assessment on their performance and their effectiveness. As the Chair has said, we've had 5 out of the 11 members completed full returns, and this really summarises those returns. I've put them into some general themes that came out and put in some suggested actions which the Audit Committee may wish to take forward, but this really is your paper on and how you assess yourselves and how you feel you wish to proceed. I've also put in suggested terms of reference, which is based on SIPFA's guidance, but to note that terms of reference would have to go to council for approval anyway. But any questions, and I welcome the discussion, but this really is your paper, and all I've done is collate the responses that have come back in.
And can I thank you for that, Nicola, because I think it's the first sort of self-evaluation we've done. I think we need to do these regularly. I think this is a starter, but no, thank you for the work that's gone into this. I think we appreciate it. Neil.
Yeah, very briefly, you're going to talk about terms of reference. I just want to say, because this is at the end of this municipal cycle, but you've made some very valid points up. But on committee size and skills, what is refreshing, I think we could extend this practice across other areas of the council, actually, for us as elected members to look at our effectiveness in other regards. But it says about the audit committee was selected or assessed against the core knowledge and skills. I'm sure that the politicians in the room will take that on board, because we can make recommendations in terms of what the future council will be. They don't necessarily have to agree with us, but, it would be helpful, if we take that discussion in another place, to which I refer, but not here. And it is the full council that decides, the size, etc. But, whether the 3 independent members want to feed back to us, I don't want to prolong the discussion now. Yeah, it's slightly theoretical in a way, Nicola, isn't it? Because, no council can predetermine what the next is going to do, but we can actually sort of like give some good practice and what lessons learned sort of stuff about size, skills, matrix, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, my personal thing, my professional background is dealing with audit committees of much smaller, of 3 or 4, and the complexity of stuff. I think I sometimes think that 11 is a little bit oversized, and that we can get through quite a good discussion with fewer members of 7 or 9. I would personally put that there for consideration in the future on Saturday. But any other thoughts on Neil's points more generally? Yeah.
I was just going to say again on committee size and skills, more so on the skills point.
Yeah, I guess that's
because obviously we're councillors, so technically we're lay people in this committee. I do think we have to have an element of core knowledge and skills, as mentioned. One of the things I think we could look at, so for example, in pensions, there's been good governance project which has been commissioned by the Team Advisory Board, and one of the things they're looking at is skills for pension committee. And I guess that similar sort of standard we should have for audit committee, because I think we do the public disservice if we don't have those core skills. I'm not saying we have to be technical experts, but we have to have the basic framework to ensure, you know, we're ensuring that there's good governance across.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll let Conor come in a second, but when I first became chair, I really benefited from the weekend thing CITFA did. So it might be that I think CITFA refresher soon. It talks about some of the skills in here, but some regular periodic training would be always appreciated. Yeah, Conrad.
Merely to say that we're starting to think about the induction programme post-May for, you know, new councillors who may be elected, or indeed changing committees. This discussion is very helpful, and, you know, the more that we can turn that into, you know, these are the things that, with the benefit of hindsight, we really ought to have done 4 years ago, and then we make sure that the training programme is better next time around.
Sorry to come back in, but I mean, Larissa and Conrad have both sort of triggered something in my mind, both on the statutory function of the council, whether it's pensions or planning, strategic development, licensing, in terms of licensing, you know, off licensing rather than licensing of premises. You know, that's and gambling, what we do, Vincent and I, you know, we do ongoing training, and I think, you know, it's something that we need to sort of like tell people. It's not to exclude them, but to make certain that the skills match. It's a bit like we're trying to do in school governing bodies nowadays, you know, to try and get a skills matching people in finance or, you know, HR or whatever. But the responsibilities are quite deep, really, and I think people need to know what the expectations of the public are, because we are a crucial check and balance mechanism for, you know, the training thing and the CITFA guidance. There is some coming out again, isn't there?
Okay, Arvinder, then Mike.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just a quick point on page 168, 5.1. Just in a way of thinking about the role of the audit committee. Yes, we are an advisory board, but at the same time, I think some of the actions that come through the audit committee should be taken on board as a serious concern for us as an authority, and not just as advisory. So I don't know how we could try to phrase that in, that we are a working partner with authority and not just as an advisory board. I think I've made myself clear.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And we can think about when we come to the terms of reference maybe as well. Mike.
I just wanted to echo, I thought it was a really good thing to do, to look at our effectiveness, and thank you for doing it, and completely in transparency, I did manage to send Nicola a blank version, and then you saying now that no one's completed it has jogged my memory that I never actually sent you the full one. So I'm one of the 6 members who hasn't sent their details through, so I will do that tomorrow morning when I'm got my personal laptop out. I was just going to ask, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I'm not obviously an expert in audit as colleagues on the call are, in terms of how climate change risk is considered within audit committees. There was just looking at my notes, there was a paper and guidance from the NAO in August, and there's sort of various bits from the Institute of the IA, Institute of Internal Auditors, on considering climate change. So I think if we're looking at reviewing terms of reference, my only observation was perhaps we could work with you, Nicola, just to weave some of that in, so that we're picking up that as a consideration, as well as obviously the importance around value for money, risk, governance, and control. I think it's become more and more of a matter that has to come to the fore of committees like this.
Yeah, and you know, the reason I'd like to recommend the terms of references, they're in line with CITFA, and I've seen that. I think it's an area that CITFA are missing, Mike. So I think if members are content, that can be an action where we go away and work with Nicola. We can take, if members could resolve to recommend the terms of reference subject to an additional line or two on those issues, and then that recommendation will be that it's taken to, I believe, full council to approve. So that's what we would ask this committee to do, to recommend it. But Nicola, do you have any views on how we could include those issues in the report?
So climate change would be a key risk And as the internal audit should be looking at key risks, and the audit committee should be gaining assurance over the key risks, it should be implicit in that. But if you want to state it explicitly, because it is such a key risk, and if you feel that that should be stated more explicitly, we can work on that to put that in. But obviously, I just do want to say again, it's up to full council to approve the terms of reference. But we can suggest.
Content to recommend the or subject to a line or two around those issues to full council, who ultimately have the decision on. Yeah, so we're making a formal recommendation. Yeah, we got that amendment. Thank you. Any other comments on the review in general?
Yeah, just have a small one. I guess in terms of accountability to the public, I think at some point we need to have a conversation about how we communicate the work that we do to the public, because generally speaking, unless you're engaged in what goes on with local authorities, you know that this is this, what we do, what's our purpose, etc. So how do we communicate better to laymen? That's my own opinion.
That's very valid. Probably valid for many committees in the council, and I think we have ongoing dialogue with officers around that. So thank you for raising it.
And are we still on? Sorry, Winston, I'll let you. Are we still on 11? Are we?
Are we still on? Is it 11? Yes.
Yeah. My attention is drawn to paragraph 4.6. Sorry, Winston, you'll have to speak up. 4.6. But the page QAIP, page 167.
Yeah.
In terms of questions inside the committee, and then I look back at the amount of respondents to the questionnaire, where only 45%, that's 5 members are responding. So do you think that if the committee had been reduced by a significant number, would it enhance the response from members? Better response. Things an indicative thing I'm trying to think of, based on what we have here.
Yeah, I think my own personal take on the membership is, a smaller committee is always easy to chair, isn't it? And so, I'm used to audit committees in public sector elsewhere that are much smaller. So I think have 7 on even fewer members at 9 would be slightly more manageable. I'm not sure about the uptake of future effectiveness surveys, but yeah, my personal gut feel would be to go slightly smaller. Okay, any quick one from the office?
Yeah, mine is certainly accountability. I'm glad there was a picture there, because I think nearly every meeting, in line with what our external auditors said, it's about, making reports accessible in clear language. Our website still doesn't seem to be very easily to navigate round. We've got IT problems tonight. I mean, mine kept going off earlier on. But, when I did look at the council calendar, it's, sometimes it's a bit bizarre how you find that. I know how to do it because I'm a councillor, but I'm just worried that if we're saying we are accountable primarily, as public servants here to put check and balance on the process. And it was very good, the report that we had to council, because again, that's open. But it's about how we just explain to the public what our role is. Because I think people are still, I would argue that there's a training thing that we might, as I think Conrad was indicating, in the induction of new elected members to say what the audit committee is. Because I think there might be some of our colleagues, council, would get slightly confused. And I think in another place they were confused on what the audit report was about. So we're new relatively, but hey, we need to, get these better embedded in our sort of processes of accountability to the public as well.
That's point to be noted. Yeah, thank you. So, thank you for that, Nicola. We move on to agenda item 12, which is the forward plan. The next meeting is actually, I think, February. Is that right? So that we'll need to just check the agenda for that. To see how we get on in the next 20 or so minutes. We've already resolved around the publication of those summary items, but we just might need to play it by ear in terms of what's manageable then. and the complaints have been pushed into that.
Could we suggest that we're not doing complaints, that we have a meeting before February? I mean, is that allowed?
Quite possible that we might want to think about doing one in January, depending on how things stock up, and myself and the vice chair, we can talk about the size of the changes. Yeah, just to flag that at this stage.
Manage. Otherwise, everything's to be backloaded to February. We've got to finish our work because of this cycle, the municipal.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, so exclusion of the press. For the next two agenda items at 14 and 15, we are going into an exempt session. So in which case we end the live stream, and do I need to say anything more in relation to
Yeah,
that?
you just need to vote that you.
Yeah, we have to vote to say that. I think.
Okay.
Well, committee. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay, we've agreed that. Thank you.
So, in the live stream.
Nisha's there.
Apologies, Chair, the sound is a little bit staccato.
Sorry, we just agreed as 13 the exclusion of the public and press and to go into exempt session, so the live stream would need to end.
Apologies, Chair, just bear with me.
No, that's okay.
Oh, no, you're not on YouTube, you're on. Oh, yeah.
There's a delay on it as well. So, hang on.